But should it be a voice too?
It should. Okay, so what was I talking about? Images. So we work in image sets. So let's go ahead and make a new project and start with that. Believe it or not, you already have one of these image sets all ready to rock. It's built in already, went out of the gate, and that's inside of this assets folder, and it's this app icon. This right here, I know that it's harder to read because I can't make that part of the interface larger, but this right here is actually a collection of every single possible app use of an app icon in an iOS on an iOS device. So down to on iOS 7 through 10 supports little graphics of the icon in a notification window, and so you have a special version for that. All the way up to iPad Pros are super high resolution and really big, and so their icons are much bigger. We're not going to go into all of these different settings, but you can see that basically everything goes from being 1x to 3x, depending on its context. For us, what we're going to do is go down here and hit the little new, and hit new image set. And the default's just the word image. I'm going to change that to dice 1. I guess a better description would be die 1 because dice is plural, but whatever. It's kind of like Lego is both singular and plural. Deal with it. All right. And then I have my dice images here, and I'm going to bring dice image 1 in. And to do that, all I have to do is click on it. Come on. And drag it. Whoops. Into the image slot. Now I'm putting 1x in here. If I was doing this the right way, I would have made my own dice image in Illustrator. I would have Googled what each one of these different sizes are and all the math for all of them and all that kind of crap, but I'm not going to do that today. And instead, what I'm going to do is just say, for our purposes, this is bad practice, but for our purposes, we're just going to put the same one in each one. Come on. You can do it. There we go. So there's 2. This is going to drive me crazy. Hold on. And 3. And then I'm not going to make all 5 or all 6 dice right now. What I'm just going to do, yeah.
Do these images, are they like linked or embedded? Or
They are embedded into the file, so you can throw them away later. Probably shouldn't, but you can if you want to. Good question. And if you make a change, you got to manually go and update them. Okay. So I'm not going to make all 6 dice. For my purposes, I'm just going to swap out an image. For you, you are going to use, I'll show you how I wrote the code, but you're going to randomize it. But, and you already know how to do that. That's not rocket surgery. I'm just going to make 2 just because I think it would drive you crazy to watch me make 6. All right, so new image set and dice 2. Now, I can name these anything I want. I'm naming them a consistent pattern because I'm going to use that in my code later. All right, and so now I'm going to go to my storyboard, which has got Jack Squad in it at this point, but I'm going to go ahead and put in the images. Now what I'm going to do is just make one die. You will make a pair of dice, you make 2 of them, and you'll do all the randomization and all that kind of stuff, but I'll show you how to do that. A dice, our die, a singular one, is an image. And we can put any image into our iOS app. And again, all all the management of which resolution goes where and all that kind of stuff gets handled for you, that's not a problem. Just know that it's just a standard little thing called an image view. And I'll drop that in. You can do all kinds of crap with image views. The first thing I'm going to do is simply change it to say I want to use dice 1. And so how to do that, I just select it and hit over here on the right there. And it's pulling in whatever is available inside that assets folder. So if I had 20 things inside of there, it would show me 20 different options. All right, so there's my dice. Now out of the gate, it's pixelated and gnarly. That's because content mode right here is set to scale to fit, or scale to fill. What you want is aspect fit, which means keep it the same aspect ratio of the image inside of this big box. Additionally, I'm going to go ahead and make it so that my image is the size that I want it to be. And so to change that, I just go here to the little ruler icon. And I'm going to say this needs to be square. So I don't care what size it is. If I was doing this for real, I'd actually measure it. But I'm just going to do it this way. And here we have our dice. Now to modify our dice, we're going to use Swift. And so to be able to trigger all that kind of stuff, I need a button. So I'll make a little roll button. Not roll button, not button. Roll button is not a standard set. And I'll change it to say roll the dice. Okay, so now I'm good on my storyboard. I'm not going to do anything else really with the storyboard. I'm not going to use the storyboard to animate or anything like that. Everything else is going to happen inside of code. The good news is most of that stuff, while a little on the complicated side, when it comes to like the code, it's totally one of those copy-paste deals where you see it once, you hang on to it until later, you copy it out, and you paste it again when you need it. So let's go ahead and switch into Venn diagram mode where we can see both sides of the world. And because we're working on smaller monitors, I'm going to kill some of these extra details so we can see more stuff. And first things first, I'm going to bring in my button. And I'm going to make sure it's set to action so I can put stuff, actually make things happen when you touch it. Up until this point, the only thing we've made a connection to are buttons and text fields. Shockingly, we can do the exact same thing with images. And it's treated exactly the same way. You just control drag over the image into the code. And an image is not like, and I'm not going to treat this image as a button or anything like that. So it's just like a text field. It's some stuff that I'm going to change some attributes around. So that's a perfect use of outlet. So I'm going to keep the connection type to outlet. And I'm going to give it a name that is distinctive, and I'll call it like first dice. And again, I know I should say first die, but for me, that just sounds like wrong, right? And I'll hit go. You can see that the only real difference between how this has been connected to how it's been connected in the past is that it knows that this is an image view. Okay? In Swift, this is not something that you need to hang on to and know that much detail about yet, but just know that images, UI images, which is what we have inside our assets folder, and UI image views are two different types of things. Images are collections of pixels, and views are things that you use to show those pixels. Does that distinction make sense? It doesn't make sense compared to what you've all done in the past. If you've done any web development, that's not how images are treated. Images are just treated as images, right? But in this, they have to kind of, there's two different things. And so you can do certain things to UI images that you can't do to UI image views. So for instance, UI images you can run a filter on, or make black and white, or draw extra pixels on top of. And UI image views are the things that hold those images, so you can move them around on the screen or what have you. Make sense? Cool. The user can never see a UI image. They can only see UI images through UI image views. Does that distinction make sense? Okay, cool. All right, so what I'm going to do is just very quickly make it so that when I click the roll dice button, it just swaps out this from 1 to 2. That's all it's going to do. Okay? Now how you'll do it when you guys take this and run with it is you're going to integrate your randomization stuff that you built already and make it so that it randomizes to a different one. And the good news is because I have all of my images named in a way that makes sense, dice underscore 1, underscore 2, underscore 3, you just randomize and just append 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at the end of dice underscore. Make sense? Okay, cool. So let's do that. I'm just going to jump back to my little version that I've made so that I don't make a mistake. And when I hit roll dice button, I want this to happen. Don't ignore this alert box because I'm going to fix it right now. So what this is saying is go to the UI image view, the thing that holds images, and it is just like a text field. Just like a text field has multiple attributes and one of them happens to be text, this has multiple UI image views have multiple attributes and one of them happens to be image. And so what this is saying is go and get that one and change its image. And what I want to change it to, and this is why I mentioned that it's different. A view is different than an image. I want to change it to a different UI image. And which UI image do I want to change it to? The one that we named in the assets folder, dice underscore 2. If you were to type this manually, it'll start making these recommendations as you go, and it's actually pretty cool. Well, you'll type in name : and it'll give you all the options that are sitting over in your assets folder, and you just choose one of them. Okay? And that's all I need to do to swap out the image. So if I hit go, and I hit roll dice, it swaps out the image. And if you were watching, here, pay attention for just a second. When that runs, you'll see what I meant by I did a bad job with these images. Watch how it kind of just jumps. That's because I didn't crop it quite right. Okay? So, the reason I didn't pay too much attention to that is because I knew I was going to be animating this sucker. And I'm going to actually make that switch when the user never sees it. Because it doesn't, when you roll a dice in real life, the dice doesn't just magically change. Like, something happens, it moves or it rolls or whatever, and then you get a new one. So what I'm going to do is use this as an opportunity to show you guys how to do a couple things. One is we'll look at timers, and the second is we'll look at how to change attributes like opacity and position and rotation, and then we'll look at how to animate all those things. So what I want to do is when you click this roll the dice button, I don't want it to instantly change from 1 to 2. What I want it to do is fade the 1 out. Then while it's faded out and you don't see it anymore, then I want it to trigger the change from 1 to 2. And then I want to animate it back, its opacity in, and I want it to rotate the dice a little bit like it's been rolled on the table. Does that make sense? If I really wanted to be awesome, what I would do is, and when you hit roll dice, it animates them off the screen, doesn't do anything with opacity, and then throws them back onto the screen, and they kind of roll in and rotate, that kind of thing. But I'm not going to, that's overkill for our purposes, okay? But frankly, once I give you these little keys to the kingdom that we're going to talk about today, you could totally make that happen. That's not outside the realm of possibility, okay? Sound good? Okay, so the first thing I want to do is make it so when I click roll dice, it does not instantly change this. And so that's using a timer. There's a number of ways we could do this, but this is the most generic multi-purpose way that will actually serve you across multiple tools, across multiple apps, which is basically, if you remember from JavaScript, there's something called set interval or set timeout, which is just it waits a certain amount of time and then fires a function. It's the same deal, only with Swift. Whereas it's going to wait a certain amount of time, and after that time has elapsed, it runs a function. So that means we need to create a brand new function that's going to be called when the timer is up. So to do that, I'm just, see how we've done override function and we've done IB action function? I'm just going to have generic function. All right, and again in Swift, because everything is shortened, it's not the word function, it's func, which I think is really fun. All right, every time I do that, I shake my butt a little bit. And so we have func, and so we can just go ahead and give this a name of the function I want to have occur. And so maybe I'll call this like update dice. You could call it anything. And the first thing I want to have happen when update dice is fired is just change the image. And to test that all this makes sense, and just so you can get, there's no magic here, all I'm going to do is when you click the button, instead of the button actually triggering the dice image change, I'm going to have the button call the function that makes the thing change. All right, which at first seems like total stupid baton passing, but it makes it, you'll see how it all works in a second. So this does exactly the same thing that we've done before, only now this functionality is wrapped over here. Now why am I doing that? Because the timeout has to call a function. So I'm going to have this, I'm going to have a little timer, and when that timer is done, it's going to call this other thing. And I'm going to bake a zillion things into this, including rotation and animation, and I may put the randomization happen inside of this and all that kind of jazz. Okay? Sound good? Okay. So now for the fun part, which is the timer. And this is, again, one of those things where just steal your code from yourself. Because it's ridiculously long. And so when you roll the dice on the roll dice button, instead of running update dice right away, what I want it to do is run this timer. I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it.
Update dice there before?
Hold on. Why did I put this here?
No, the update dice, like under the ID action.
Oh, because that's how my brain works, is I think first things go on, things that get called first go on top. There's no technical reason why it has to be in that order. So I could put this up here, but that's not how my brain works. Like how my brain works is first the dice roll button gets pressed, and then we call update dice and all that kind of stuff. All right, so let's walk through how this timer works. Timer is a new thing, just like UI image view or view controller or whatever. It's a class of stuff, and inside of it, it says a method called schedule timer. There's a variety of other timers inside of that, and schedule timer requires all of these different attributes. We'll just walk through a couple of them, the ones that really matter, but just remember, just like everything else, this is a copy and paste deal. In fact, if you start to type in timer .scheduled timer, it'll give you all that stuff to start with. And you can look at these different options, these three different options for scheduled timer. And you can see that I'm using this bottom one. And when you hit it, it'll populate all that crap in there for you. But time interval is a number of seconds that need to pass before this timer executes. And note that it's measured in seconds. Unlike some other programming languages you might work in where it's measured in like milliseconds, this is in seconds. So this is saying 1.5 seconds needs to pass. Target is what needs to change. And what needs to change is the current view controller that we're in. So we're just going to pass it. This is going to change. And then inside of selector, it's just, there's a lot more here than we need to talk about. But just know that inside of selector, it's just saying what function do you want it to run when the timer runs out. And so I'm just saying go inside of the view controller called view controller and run update dice, which happens to be right here. And you can see that that function is inside of the view controller called view controller. Okay? So it's using dot syntax just like solarsystem.earth.northamerica. United States.ohio.oxford. laws dot whatever this number is dot rd dot right pocket is where you'll find my wallet, right? Same deal. So this is saying the thing is called view controller. Go inside of it dot and run update dice. Yeah.
Wait, is that the animation or
No animation yet. This is just a simple timer that says wait 1.5 seconds to change the dice. Because I don't want to start animating it when the dice is already changed, right? I don't want to change from the 1 to the 2 and then have it fade out and then have it roll. What I want to do is fade out the 1, change it, and then fade it in and rotate it. So this timer right here is, at least for our purposes, you can certainly use timers to do animation. For our purposes today, we're not doing that. Then there's some other stuff, and then the last little piece that really matters is repeat is set to false. You could make it so when you press dice, every 1.5 seconds, it rolls the dice over and over and over and over and over again for forever until the app is terminated, or you tell it to turn off the timer. For our purposes, we're just saying false. Just do this once. Okay? So, now if I run this, what will happen is it'll look like it's broken. I'll click the button and nothing will happen for 1.5 seconds, and then it'll change from a 1 to a 2. Because after 1.5 seconds, it runs update dice, and update dice just says change the 1 to the 2. Cool? Great. All right, now for animation. So I'm going to do, for today, for now, we're just going to do 3 animations. The first animation is going to kick off the second the button is pressed. Okay? And the moment the button is pressed, I want to kick off an opacity change. It fades it from totally full down to 0. And I want that animation to last 1.5 seconds. Because think of a timeline, right at the 1.5 seconds moment is when I want to swap out the image. So I don't want to swap that image out while it's still visible to the user. I mean, in theory, you could swap it out. You can make the animation last 1 second, and then nothing happens for 0.5 seconds, and then switch it out. But that's whatever. So I'm going to make an animation last for 1.5 seconds that fades it out, and then once it's faded out, it fires this timer. And that timer is going to run update dice, and the first thing that's going to do is swap out the image, and then I'm going to kick off another animation that fades it in. So that's my second animation. And the third animation I want to do is make it so that the dice looks like it's been rolled on the table, so it's going to rotate. Okay? And we'll use, if we get to it, I'm trying to move quick so that those of you that crashed the plane, we can have time to put it back together. If we get to it, we'll randomize the rotation of the dice so it doesn't always rotate to the same place. And we'll randomize how long it takes for the dice to rotate to its spot, so it looks like it's being sort of different speeds on the table. Yeah?
It wants us to convert the function to an objective C. And it had a red thing.
Anybody else have? Everybody have it?
I just hit fix and it was fine. I didn't have the.
It didn't change
Just push it
anything.
off
You
for
just let
later.
it fix.
Just worry about it.
Right now, it's not changing anything, but I'm afraid we might be using some Swift specific stuff. So, just again, as usual, I will give you this code. So the crucial piece is not follow along. The crucial piece is get the ideas. Okay. So if it breaks, don't worry about it. Okay. And meanwhile, I'll figure out what the deal is. We might have different versions of Xcode or something. I don't know. Okay. So I have this, and I need to do an animation. And again, just like usual, I'm not going to remember anything. I'm just going to get myself and some animation code out. And I'm going to make the first animation, which is animate to 0 opacity. I'm going to put that right on the dice roll. And this is what I'm doing. Inside of UI view, the class of UI view, which inside of our view controller in the storyboard is a UI view. So in the storyboard we have a view controller, and inside of that view controller we have something called a UI view. Just like the image view has images inside of it, UI view has UI elements inside of it. Okay, and UI elements are just the widgets that you drag out of that library.
Yes, my question.
Okay. So inside of UI views, all of them have a bunch of different things. One of the things that they have a bunch of attributes, things you can change about the entire UI view. They also have a bunch of methods, which are just functions that you can call that do stuff. And one of them is animate. So I'm saying go into the UI view and run an animation. And what I want to do, say how long it lasts. So right now I'm saying that it lasts a second. We'll go ahead and change that to 1.5 seconds so it matches our time interval. And then another thing that I pass into animate is animations. And I can actually pass multiple animations into this. I'm just going to pass one, which happens to be changing the alpha. And so this is saying self, which means go into the UI view, change the thing that's been named first dice, which I named it right here. And all UI image views have an attribute called alpha, and change its alpha to 0. And so no matter what my alpha was to start with, it's going to animate it to 0 over 1.5 seconds. If my alpha was 0.5, it'll animate it down over 1.5 seconds from 0.5. In this case, my alpha is the default, which is 1, which means full-on, totally no transparency.
So 0, like the numbers, like 0 to 1.5, that's all.
Yeah, 0.5 is 50%. Yeah.
Amount of transparency.
It's yes, it's like a percentage.
And
See
what,
mouse.
what indicates that it's it's transparency?
It's because .alpha is an attribute of all UI images, and alpha just means transparency.
So if I wanted to switch like opacity, it would be like maybe beta or something.
Opacity and alpha are the same thing.
Okay, or like another one.
Another attribute would be you can change the origin's x coordinate. So you can change where the box is drawing from. So you could do it would be origin.x, I think.
Origin, okay.
So you could say change the origin. What about the origin you want to change? X, and then you could animate it horizontally or vertically or whatever. In a bit, we'll do the same. We'll do something similar to cause a rotation. Okay, so that fades it out. And pretty quickly, we start getting something that is pretty slick. It fades it out, and it never fades it back in. But just know that the image has changed underneath there, okay? So now we need to fade it back in. And so to do that, I want that to happen after the timer is fired. So you can think of the timer as like a delay. So I want the animation to happen after a certain amount of seconds. And so I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy this and paste it down here underneath the update dice function, or inside the update dice function rather, and set it to 1. And so now it'll fade out, wait 1.5 seconds, change the image, and then fade it back in. Fades in. Okay, that bloop was the change of the image file. Okay? Sweetness. All right, now let's do something more advanced. Let's rotate that sucker. Okay? And how we do that is, unfortunately, dot rotation isn't a thing. That's not as easy to work with. Instead, what we're going to do is use something that's built into every single iOS application. And that is, it's called core graphics. Core graphics is part of what runs everything that you see, and it comes along with the ride with every single iOS app built inside of Xcode. You don't have to do anything to get it, and core graphics do some really awesome stuff. If you care about stuff under the hood, one of the neat things, anytime you call a core graphics function, that work is being offloaded from the processor of the device and pushed to a special chip that's just designed for graphics. The graphics processor handles all of that animation. So what that means is you can do all kinds of complex data crunching on the processor and let the animation happen over here, which is really cool. So anytime you call a core graphics function, it's going to do that kind of hand waving for you. You don't do any of it. It just says, you handle that over there. Goodbye, and it waves and it does it, and then it says, I did it, yay. And you can do some other stuff over here, which is pretty nice. There's all kinds of other things that are like core graphics. So like later in the semester we'll talk about core motion, which lets you track if there's steps happening and that kind of thing. Because inside of every iOS device there's a special chip that's super low powered, and what it's doing all the time, even if you think the device is off, all the time it's watching step count, for instance. Okay? And so you can call that separately outside of the normal processor, which is pretty nice. So to do that, we need a little bit of extra love. And I'll pull that in right here. I'm going to put it inside of the animate when we come back in from the dice roll. But you can put this anywhere. And if I put it inside the animation, it'll animate to the new rotation angle. Okay, so what I'm saying is you can go ahead and change the alpha, but then directly underneath that line, I'm adding this other thing, which is transform. You can do a lot with transform. Dot transform lets you do scaling and all other kinds of, like lots of stuff inside of dot transform. What we're going to do is send it, dot transform is going to get sent something from core graphics, which is why it's CG. And then core graphics is going to run the transformation, and it's going to change. It can change a variety of things. I could change scale. I can change all kinds of stuff. But what I'm going to change is rotation angle. Let me scroll down so you can see that a little better. And rotation angle uses a float. We haven't talked about other types of numbers, I don't think. But and this is super counterintuitive to everyone who's ever had a normal math class. But there's more than one kind of number in computer parlance. Okay? We've only talked so far about integers, which is what you normally think of when you think about numbers. Integers, unfortunately, in computer parlance, can't be used to do all kinds of math. Instead, what we need to use is floats. Floats are more complicated. Floats take up more memory in the device. You want to avoid using them unless you absolutely need them. This is a good example of when we need them. Floats let you do multiplication, division. You can have point, results, all that kind of stuff. Float is just a normal class of things inside of Swift, just like string and int. But we're not going to use just any old normal float. We're going to specifically call a float that uses the motion processor. And so that's core graphics float, CG float. And so again, I'm going to use that thing. I'm going to use the CG as much as I can, because while our little dice roll is super simple, you can imagine a world where being able to push off all that extra math over here really frees up speed over here. And so we're going to use that as much as we possibly can, because if we don't, it's just sitting there doing nothing for us. So I'm going to say I want a rotation angle, and rotation angle is just simply calculated like this. The rotation that I want times pi divided by 180. We're not going to get into all that in radians and all that kind of crap, because you all learned that in 7th grade, or 8th grade or 9th, whenever you did geometry. That's where you learned all that stuff. We're not going to bother with that today. Just know this will, and if it makes your nose bleed to think about that, and you have some PTSD from that era, don't worry about it. Just copy and paste, okay? And just know that this first number is the angle that I want to rotate to. So right now, I'm going to rotate it to 25 degrees. We won't have time, but you can very quickly imagine how you would make that random, okay? All right. Fades out, changes, and rotates. Now, unfortunately, if I roll again, I don't know if it rotated again. No. I wasn't sure if it rotated more, but it doesn't do anything now. other than fade out and fade in. But this gives you everything you need to run with to be able to enhance your existing dice game. Now you can make it so instead of it just saying 1, 1 snake eyes, you can have a little picture of a 1 and a little picture of a 1 dice and the word snake eyes. And you can make it rotate to all different angles randomly. And you can make the speed of the dice moving and animating random. You can make that change randomly. You can do all kinds of stuff. If you wanted to, you can even take this further and make it so that when you click the dice, it swipes off the app as if it's being grabbed off the table, and then it draws it back onto the app and rotates at a different speed and moves really, you can trigger multiple animations that take different speeds. So one of them rotates at a different speed, then it animates, then it moves onto the screen. All of that kind of stuff is totally doable given everything you have. I like to say that programming, you've heard me say this before if you had me in any programming class before, I like to say programming is just like Taco Bell. There's like 20 ingredients and they just combine them in a different way. All right, so now it's a chalupa, now it's a whatever, okay? They're all the same thing, only they're just adding deep fryers. So same thing here, you're just getting the basics and you're just gonna combine them in different unique ways to make all kinds of really cool stuff happen. Cool? Are we good? Anybody have any big high-level questions on how they would take this over the weekend and take their existing dice application and do everything I just said? Yeah.
So, if we did an if then statement to call the dice name, instead of using the numbers, would we just call the UI images?
Yep. Or that's a great question. There's one thing we haven't talked about, which is how to squish. You'll see. Okay. There's one thing I haven't taught you yet, which is how do I randomize make a random integer, put it into a variable, and then use that along with this name. So it can say dice underscore whatever that random number was. Okay? So that in something as simple as JavaScript is very easy. You just, like, if you wanted to combine first and last name, you even saw this already with the very first week's stuff. To combine first and last name is just string plus string, and that becomes first and last name. It gets a little more complicated with Swift because you can't just smash together different variable types. You can't take an int and smash it into a string because it's thinking ints get added, so 1 plus 1 is 2. How do you add 1 and dice underscore, right? That's not a thing. So you got to kind of do some hoop jumping. But just really quickly, just to give you one last little bit of what you'll need, is for our purposes, I won't make a random number. I'll just hard code it to 2. What don't you like? Oh, yeah, of course it's never used. All right, random number as 2, and then we're down here, I'm going to add it. So I can't do this. This will probably give me an error. Yep. Because I'm taking an int and combining it with a string. So what I need to do is the same tricks we've done already, which is just manually convert that int into a string. And to do that, just like before, it's just this. And that will be fine. And that will work just like as if I had typed in dice underscore 2. The only difference is now, for your purposes, instead of making var a random number not being random but always be 2, for your purposes, you'll put the little random generator thing here. Did that answer your question, Ben?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I'll figure it out.
Okay, yeah, you will. Okay, cool. Any other questions about this? Yeah.
What did the first timer do?
This right here, this guy here, timer.scheduledTimer, this is just saying, don't instantly fade in the dice, don't instantly rotate the dice, don't instantly change the image of the dice. Wait a second and a half to do that.
Okay.
And so it's waiting a second and a half, and then it calls the function that updates the dice, that fades it in, rotates it, and changes the image. Because, why are we waiting a second and a half? Because we want that other animation where it fades out to finish. So it fades out.
So the first one is fading out, and then this one's saying wait.
This fades in and rotates and changes the image.
So I do this for 2 dice.
Yeah.
What I need to do is write 2 different functions, like update die 1, update die 2.
You could, or you could put it all inside of here and just have
Just call
another.
it 2 times.
Yeah, just do everything
yeah.
twice. Or instead of saying first dice item, say second dice item.
Okay.
Cool, that kind of thing. Yeah. If you wanted to make it so it was possible to like roll one dice separate than the other, then you would do it the way you were saying.
Okay.
But if that's not a thing, then this will work.
Cool.
Okay, any other questions? Great. You will run with this over the weekend. So you're going to be doing 2 different things over the weekend. One of them is an exercise, this is it, which is combine what we just did today with your existing dice application so that you can do all the stuff that we just talked about. And I'll have some stretch goals in there where you're doing more than just rotating. Maybe you make it so it animates or whatever. Okay? And you can do some Googling to try to hit those stretch goals if you want to. Okay. Next is sorry, I'm just thinking about what are we going to actually do to pull off. Yeah. We'll do one more thing today, and then we'll break. So I'm going to make, we'll do 2 things at once. Up until this point, we've done only single view applications. Okay? So up until now, we just had a single screen, and we can make it so you can go to other screens, but it's starting as a single view application. What we're going to do today is a tabbed application. A tab application is what you're used to. You've seen it 1,000 times across the bottom. There's little tabs, and you hit on them, and they go to different screens. Okay? So we're going to hit tab application, and its built-in default tab application is just a simple 2-tabbed thing. And if I look at the storyboard, you'll see that I have something a little different than what you're used to. You can see that in the tab bar, there's a new thing called tab bar controller. And it's just like a view controller, only instead of it controlling a view, it controls a tab bar. And what's great about this is you don't need to think about how tab bars behave at all. You don't need to put in a button that controls views or anything like that. You don't need to make it so that it'll automatically change the color of the buttons that when they're in the one that's selected or anything like that. It's all built in, all totally magic. And you can see right down here, it just says first and second. And it's pointing to 2 different view controllers. One that's called first, one that's called second. And you can see over in our code, it's created instead of just a singular view controller like it does when you make a single view application, it's made 2, first view controller and second view controller. And out of the gate, this one has a lot more functionality built into it. I can just do this, and I don't have to do any work for it, which is super awesome because we're literally, think about all this that's happening here. These buttons have to change their colors and all that kind of stuff. I don't have to do anything for that. It just is free. What's also awesome about this is that let's say this summer, Apple comes out with a whole new aesthetic paradigm for all of their apps and say, okay, it's no longer a gray bar at the bottom, it's an orange bar at the bottom, and blah, 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 blah. All you'll need to do when that time comes is open Xcode, compile, and you're done. Because it's using these standard controls, and so those standard controls, when you open Xcode, will update to the newest version of the standard controls, and when you hit compile, you get all the new stuff along with it, which is cool. Now, there's a couple things you want to notice. One is, why would I ever want an icon that's a circle? And why would I ever want an icon that's a square? I want my own icons. How do I make those? These are just images. They're just black and white PNG images, where the stuff on the outside is clear, transparent, totally nothing alpha channel, and then it's just black for the circle and black for the square, and the application handles all the tinting and all that kind of stuff for me. So if you go into your assets folder here, you'll see that you no longer just have an app icon asset, you also have a first and a second. How you change that is you make them in Photoshop and you just replace them. Or you add a new one down here and you give it the name third or setting screen or whatever you want it to be called, and then you reference that over in the storyboard. So to do that, you would just take this guy here and say I want to modify the tab controller. And crap, where is that? I always forget where that setting is. Huh. I'll figure that out for Tuesday. But you can change it. Okay, just know that it's possible. Okay, and then if you want to wire up additional view controllers, it's literally as simple as command dragging off of the tab bar controller to a new view controller that you create, and it drops a new one of these down here, and you can modify all that kind of stuff. And it's going to name it based on the name that you've given these view controllers. Okay, and that is customizable, so you could call the view controller setting screen, and down here you can call it settings. But that's neither here nor there. All right, and so that is one way that we can just out of the gate get navigation controls that we don't have to do any real work for, is they just exist. The one thing I will say is, remember how on Tuesday we talked about how whatever you have on screen, that's all that's there? That planet, universe A disappears when you go to universe B. It's as if it doesn't exist. This, it's similar. It's not breaking that rule. However, these both exist at the same time inside of this. So as long as you're showing the tab bar controller, screen 1 and screen 2 both exist. And you want that to happen because in this UI paradigm, you want it when you can scroll through a list in screen 1, jump over to screen 2 and do something, and then when you jump back to screen 1, it's still scrolled. Does that make sense? It's better for the user that way. Now there is a way to reset the screen when you jump around, and we'll get to that eventually. But just know that that's how this works, is that this always exists and this always exists, as long as you have the tab bar controller on screen. Okay, so that's one that's out of the gate, and it behaves exactly like you would expect it to. We're not going to bother with that. The last thing I want to show you for today and I suppose I could have done this inside of the tab bar controller, but it's just simpler to view it inside of single view application, is you all have seen this before. You tap on something, it goes to a subscreen, and along the top bar of the navigation window is a little arrow that says go back to that other screen that you were just on. And you tap that and it slides back in. And so it moves left to right instead of like how we've done so far, which is it fades in from the bottom. Instead it's like you're digging deeper when you move to the right and you back out to the left. To do that is actually super cool and super built in, and you don't have to do any real work for it. You just go to storyboard. And I'm going to create a second view controller. So I'm going to put some stuff in the first one so you can see what we're doing. And we'll put another view controller on. All right, so on my first page, I have a label that says first page and a button. On my second page, I have a thing that says second page and nothing. What I'm going to do is make it so when you click on the button, it goes to second page. And when you get to second page, you have a little navigation bar at the top that lets you go back to first page. Make sense? Okay. To do that, all you need to do is take any set of view controllers that you have and hit editor embed in navigation control. And now all of that stuff is built in. So I just hit navigation controller. It creates a navigation controller, which is just like the tab thing. And it's saying, this view controller is inside of this navigation controller. And now, whenever I go to a subpage, it'll do the thing at the top. You can see it's like a little gray bar. It'll do the thing at the top. And because it's inside of a navigation controller, just like tab controllers have stuff inside of them, when you move off of a page and come back, both of those exist. The universes all continue to exist because they're inside of a navigation controller. So I'm going to wire this up so that this button does something and just simply segues to second page. And you can see I have the little doodad at the top of the screen. Nothing is there. I hit the button and it goes to the second page and it says back and it goes back to the first page. I can even scroll. Well, I can't scroll, but if I change this view at all, when I go to the second page and come back to it, it will still persist, which is pretty sweet.
How did you do the navigation control again?
All I did is I selected the view controller here and then hit editor, it's at the top, editor embed in navigation controller. And it handles all that stuff for me, which is super cool.
So you're gonna have to do that for every single view controller.
What's that?
You're gonna have to do that for every single view controller.
No, only view controllers that you want in a chain, right? So I didn't need to embed the second one inside of the navigation controller because the first one already was, right? But if you had some other, let's say you have multiple tabs, and then the first tab is a list of all your contacts, and then you click on one of those people, and it slides over and shows you that person, you can back out. That's one of the tabs. And the next tab is some other thing that you can do. That also has a different kind of trail that you could follow down. Those are all going to be in different navigation controllers. Okay, questions? Let's show you one more fun thing. I'll just tell you one more fun thing because we're just going to move quick. So today is like the fun, sizzly stuff. You learned about animation and you learned about navigation and all that kind of stuff. One last fun thing, and that is if you're tired of just running inside the simulator, you can run it on anything that you are working on here on an actual device. And all you need to do is plug it into your computer, and your phone will say, do you want to trust this computer? And you say yes. And then up here where it says iPhone 7 Plus right now, and it's running inside the simulator, it'll have a little picture of your real phone with the name of your real phone, and you can just compile straight to that device and run it on that device, which is awesome. It used to cost $100 to be able to do that, but now you can do all local installs for free, and so you don't have to do anything to do it, which is fun. Yeah. It also just don't do it without an internet connection, because the first time you do it, it has to download a whole bunch of extra crap. But
If you unplug your phone, can you still run that?
yeah,
Oh, cool.
you can't distribute it so like over the internet without paying $100, but you can run it on any number of test devices you have access to.
Will you just throw it into like a little basic weight app
Yep.
on your phone?
Yep. And if you wanted to, we'll get to this, but if you wanted to change that, all you need to do is, you already have seen the basics, which is inside this assets folder, every project has an app icon. And just make a little PNG and drop it in there, and now it's no longer, the reason it's white is because these are all empty. The second you start filling them, they'll show up as whatever icon you want to.
So you just unplug your phone to like stop it, get your phone back.
I'll just, I mean, your phone will still work. It's basically installing an application to your phone. It's as if you went to the App Store and downloaded the app. As long as it's connected, you'll also get all the debugging stuff inside of Xcode, which is kind of cool. So if you have like prints and all that kind of stuff, even if you're tapping around your phone, you'll see the results show up in Xcode in real time, which is pretty cool. If you unplug it, obviously can't do that. But yeah. So if you needed to have a dice game with your pals at a party, now you know how to do that, okay? or a thing that lets you pick what kind of dog food you should buy at the grocery store. Now you know how to do that. All right, so last thing I said, we're going to have 2 things due on Tuesday. The second thing due on Tuesday, so the first one, and these will be on Canvas, so don't worry, just ask any questions you have about how you generally make this happen. The first thing is the dice game, so I want you to take your existing dice code, modify it so you have 2 dice that animate using the same stuff we talked about today, and I'll put all that code on Canvas. And I want you to do the same thing where it changes the dice, it rotates it, and it says it's 2 ones and it says snake eyes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll put some stretch goals on there too. So if you want to earn some extra points, you can try to accomplish some of the stretch goals. Then the second thing is I want you to take your existing annual age calculator, and instead of having it go into a totally new page that scrolls up from the bottom, I want you to have it go to a second page using navigation controller. So it slides in, you hit the back button, it goes back out. And it shows a little picture of the recommended food that you want it to have. So, and you can find any picture animal food that you want, I don't care. Okay? So it doesn't do that much more, we're just adding a little bit of sizzle on top, and there'll be some additional stretch goals. So for instance, if you really want to learn this stuff really well and you want to push yourself even further, instead of on the first page it says how old is it and you type in using a keyboard the dog is 7, one of the stretch goals will be you choose from a scrolly list and choose 7. Another stretch goal will be put in the dog's birthday and automatically calculate how long it's been. Does that make sense? Neither one of those I'm showing you how to do, but if you want to go try to figure that out, awesome. Okay? Then on Tuesday, we'll do something you probably all are starting to wonder about if you're at all thinking about how it actually makes real things happen. And that is, so far, every time you run the application, it's existed. It never existed before in the history of the universe. Okay? So imagine if every time you launch your email application, it says, hey, what's your username and password? Imagine how annoying that would be. Okay? So in our little dog and cat and fish application, making someone every single time put in how old the dog is to find out what food they're supposed to buy is annoying. So on Tuesday, we'll talk about how to persist data from run to run to run to run to run. And that will allow us to do all kinds of cool stuff later, like saving that data up to iCloud. So if they have an iPhone and an iPad, if they make one change over here, it'll automatically populate the change over here as well, which is really cool. Okay? You all good? Awesome. We have about 15 minutes that we'll use to help any of you that are stuck. Otherwise, we're done, and I'll see you on Tuesday.